him.
I want to watch the news.
Are you making headway at least?
This is the news.
Smack-a-magob, it's time for the only news that matters. And Michael Anthony claims that Journey tried to kick Van Halen off their tour every week when the bands were on the road together in 1978. During a recent conversation with Sirius XM Eddie Skunk, Michael Anthony looked back on his famous tours with Van Halen, noting that in the 1978 trek was especially memorable. He said, "We were just freaking fired up so much that first tour in 78 with David Lee Roth. And something I'll never forget. At the time, Journey was the headliner, with Montrose occupying the second slot on the bill. Van Halen had released their self-titled debut album that February and was the opening act. Despite their early billing, the rapidly rising rock stars regularly whipped audience into a frenzy, much to the chagrin of the headliners who had to go on after them." Yeah, that must have been painful. So, they were trying to kick us off the tour every week on that one, Anthony said, but we were selling tickets. The record companies kept going, "No, you can't kick them off the tour." In a 2020 interview with UCR, former Journey singer Steve Perry looked back on the same 1978 tour with Van Halen, and he said, "Now you got to remember that Eddie Van Halen and the group were on their first tour with Journey, and we brought them out to open for us at the 3,000 seaters we were doing at the time. They cleaned our clock plenty of times and woke us the fuck up pretty quick. They were so focused and so on fire that they were just relentless. That was the most musical relentlessness that I have ever seen." In a separate conversation with UCR, guitarist Neil Sean also noted that the ruthless nature of the tour. He said, "It was a competitive guitar bill, and all I can tell you is that at the time, Edward was red hot. But I was jamming hard, Ronnie Montrose was jamming hard, and we all were jamming hard, you know? We were holding our own, onto our own, but I'm glad I wasn't coming after Van Halen at that point. That's all I can tell you." All right, yeah, I can imagine. I wasn't there. I can't say, you know, they cleaned the Journey and Montrose clock, but I can totally see that happen. You see, I didn't see the first two Van Halen tours. I didn't come into Women and Children first. At that point, greatest show I ever saw. Fair warning, the greatest show I ever saw, period. Diver Down was awesome too, and so was 84. And Eat 'em and Smile was a freak show. I would even say Eat 'em and Smile was better than the 84 tour. But they were the greatest live band I've ever seen in my life, so I can imagine them totally messing Journey and Montrose up. Now, the same thing can be said about Black Sabbath. Even Ozzy came out and said, they destroyed us. But then there's Jim Florentine, the guy that did the metal show. I remember when they had Tony Iommi on the show, and Jim was talking about, I was at that Madison Square Garden show, and Van Halen was awesome, but they were not better than Black Sabbath. Maybe he was saying that because Tony Iommi was there, but the way he described it was, they didn't know the album yet. This was an unknown band to them, and he liked it, but he thought Black Sabbath was better. Hey, maybe that's his opinion. Maybe he's right, or maybe he's just kissing Iommi's ass by saying that. But I believe Ozzy. Because Van Halen was a freak of nature. It wasn't just a regular concert. There was something special in the air. when Van Halen was on stage. It was like no other band I've ever seen since, including Van Halen with Wolfgang. I mean, not even close. And it's weird because they were the greatest band I ever saw live. Then I got a free ticket of 5150, and that was the worst show I ever saw live. Correction, no, it wasn't the worst show I ever saw live. It was the worst show I ever saw live at that time. But when I saw the Oh You Wait One tour, when I went to the Monsters of Rock, really just to see Metallica. But I liked Scorpions and Dokken, because at that point, Metallica was never in South Florida. I never got to see Cliff Burton, which breaks my heart. But the first time I saw him was at the Monsters of Rock tour. I went to that show, and they were phenomenal. Dokken wasn't. Scorpions were good. Van Hagar was the worst. I would say the worst band on the whole bill. And it was actually the worst concert I ever saw in my life. I don't think I've ever seen a worse show than that. It was abysmal. On a side note, I know a friend of mine that was said he was backstage at that Monster Rock tour, and there was a guy there wearing a Van Halen 1984 shirt, and Sammy demanded him to take it off. I believe my friend, because Sammy's a douche. Nobody, I mean nobody, can touch Van Halen live. When I started going to shows back in 79 to now, 2024, that's 45 years later, I think, or something like that. I have never witnessed, a show as good as the original Van Halen and the Eat 'Em and Smile show. Those were the best shows I ever saw live. I didn't like the Skyscraper show. I thought that was kind of lame, but because Dave at the time, man, it's like you release a bombastic album with Eat 'Em and Smile, but still, Vangina's 5150 did better. So I think Dave was just trying to, get like keyboardy and fluffy on, the next album to compete with Vangina and make kind of a pussy album. Though there are some tracks on Skyscraper I like, but no, nowhere near Eat 'Em and Smile. I actually love the hell out of that album. And what a show. What a band with Billy Sheehan, Steve Vai, and Greg Bissonette. My God, what an incredible show. And when I met Greg Bissonette and I interviewed him, I told him about that show and he remembered the venue. Oh, the Sportatorium, there was nothing but woods going there. There was, it was in the middle of nowhere. I was like, yep, you remembered, man. That's exactly how it was. And yeah, man, what an amazing bombastic show that Dave killed his career with Skyscraper, I think. I mean, yeah, it might have went platinum or something, but a lot of albums go platinum after they release a successful album. And, the next album goes platinum, but then as time goes by, it doesn't sell. And it's kind of like people wake up and go, ah. And I think that's what happened with Dave. I thought A Little Ain't Enough is a good album, but it was too late. He already ruined his career, and we were entering the 90s where people did not look fondly upon having a good time. And I saw the Little Ain't Enough tour, and I don't know, maybe it was just a show I went to. The sound was terrible. I couldn't make anything out, so yeah, Dave, and then, Dave after that went really downhill with Filthy Little Mouth, which I actually do like a few songs on there, like Land's Edge and Sunburn. I love those songs, but for the most part, it's a craptacular album, and yeah, it was sad, because I was rooting for Dave, man. I'll never forget going to see Dave on the Filthy Little Mouth tour in a little club, the Blutton South. And I remember, the one thing I remember about that show is Dave said, "Hey, Sammy Hagar," and he put up his middle finger and he said, "You're number one." I thought that was pretty awesome. But at that time, Vangina was huge, selling millions. I mean, well, if we're going to be fair about it, Vangina's 5150 sold 6 million. Every album after that sold much less. But it was still selling millions, and it was destroying, Dave, which showed you how lame the 90s were for Vangina to be better than David Lee Roth. But then again, David Lee Roth didn't help releasing lackluster albums. Not that it mattered, because David Lee Roth could have released an awesome album. But it was the 90s. They looked down on David Lee Roth, at that time. It was like, he's the guy that pretty much invented hair bands, And, I love classic Van Halen with David Lee Roth, but what they spawned was horrible. A lot of those bands that try to be Van Halen were very shitty. The same thing with Pantera in the 90s. Pantera, all the bands that copied Pantera were pure shit. I can maybe find a hair band here and there that I like that were inspired by Van Halen. Not one of those poo metal bands with the breakdowns. I didn't like none of it. But anyway, that's it for the only news that matters. Leave your comments below what you feel about this story. I really would appreciate it. And please subscribe to my channel if you haven't. Ring that little notification bell. I really would appreciate that. And please check to see if you're still subscribed, if you are subscribed to my channel. Because people are getting unsubscribed for no reason. And that's as lame as the 90s. Anyway, and like the video, it's good for the YouTube algorithms. So stay frosty, listen to Black Sabbath, and smack 'em a gob.
Farewell and adieu to you fair Spanish ladies. Farewell and adieu, you ladies of Spain. For we've received orders for to sail back to Boston. And so never more shall we see you again.